So we're going to start the printmaking on this piece by going back to our stem and the leaves that we have already cut. Remember, we put them over to the side. I'm going to use just an ordinary plastic fork and some paint that I got from the public library. I'm going to dip my fork into that, and then I am just going to take it and create interesting paint marks. I'm going up and down my stem. I'm using a slightly different color than my green paper that I used, just to make, we're just having fun, exploring with paper, paint. What can we do with tools that we have around us? And I'm going to put this over to the side to let it dry. And I'm going to keep doing the same thing with my leaves. So I can get some paint on my fork, but it doesn't last very long. So I'm having to dip. And then once I get a little bit on my paper, it's easier to use my fork to make the designs I'm wanting to make. So printmaking is making a print of something. So we are printing onto this paper with paint, and we're just kind of making markings with our fork to add some texture and some different color, interesting color. Our lines are easier to make once we get a good amount of paint on our leaf. So I'm going to move those over to the side and let those dry. What if you don't want to make fork markings? What if you want to try something different? Well, there are so many different things that you can try. You could use a piece of cardboard, and I'm going to cut this one a little bit more. So that I can dip it easier. And I'm going to use this part, and I'm going to dip it lightly into my paint, and then I'm going to start printing onto my leaf. Maybe I'm just playing with the texture. Maybe I'm trying to create something specific on my leaf. Maybe I wanted lines on my leaf. So I'm creating the lines that go across and then turning my leaf around and doing the line that goes up. You might get a little messy, but part of printmaking is having fun. So see what kind of texture you can add to your leaf and your stems. While those are drying, I'm going to come to my flower petal paper, and you can see that it's dried by now, and I'm going to separate these two parts. Because they have different purposes. I'm going to cut around the middle of my flower. I chose yellow because I'm going to print on top of it. And now I'm going to come to my petal paper. The petal paper is bright and fun. It has a lot of texture and color. And so now we're going to cut this out. If we were to just start drawing in the middle of the paper one petal, we know that we would not get very many petals to go all the way around the middle of our flower. So we have to use this paper wisely. I'm going to fold it into parts. Let's see, I think I can get, about 3 folds. Okay. If you need help folding, ask a loved one beside you to help you. And I'm going to draw on the white so that the pretty paper underneath doesn't have any pencil marks. And I'm going to draw my flower petals. Trying to get them about the same all the way. Now you can draw more, or if you are able to, you can fold your paper and get more. Sometimes what I like to do is cut the first one out. Notice that my paper is still folded. Sometimes I like to cut the first one out and then I use it as a pattern to draw more. I might actually fit more on this paper if I go down, up, down, up. Sometimes that happens with slightly triangular shapes. Continue here now. You can see how I'm going almost, looks like upside down on some of them. This may be too many petals, but I'm going to for sure have enough using my paper wisely when I'm cutting out. Okay, now that I have my petals traced, I'm just going to take a few moments to cut them out. Maybe you do not want the exact same shape over and over again. So maybe you're wanting to draw all your petals. Maybe you painted a couple of different papers, and so you feel like you have plenty of paper to use. I just needed to make sure that I had enough with the small space that I am working with. Okay, so now I can take my pieces, and once again, if they're attached, just cut them apart. I like how the flower petals are, the design lines are going up and down on these and not across. A lot of times when we're looking at things of nature, we see that the lines are coming out. And so now I can just take a moment to make sure that I'm going to have enough petals to go all the way around my flower, and I am. I'm going to have plenty. I have 2 left over. Okay, I'm going to have plenty of flower petals for my piece. And so now I'm going to move this and come over to my background area. And I'm going to start kind of giving myself an idea of where I want this to be located. I think if I place my flower here, I'll have plenty of space. And then I will place my stem there and my leaves. My stem and leaves are still drying, so I'm gonna just let them be there. And I'm going to start gluing my flower down now that I have a basic idea of where I want it to be. When we are gluing our collage down, we do not need to cover the entire piece of paper with our glue. We're just going to use a few dots of glue. For a smaller piece, 1 to 2 dots. For a bigger piece, maybe 5 to 7 dots. So I'm going to glue that there, and then I'm going to start taking my petals and gluing them down. If you've worked with me before, you know that one of my favorite sayings with glue is just a dot, not a lot. So I'm overlapping my flower petals with the middle of my flower and my background. And maybe your flower petals are touching a little bit more than mine are. Maybe yours are more like that. Remember that if you used a pencil to sketch, the pencil part is being glued down so that we're only left with the beautiful color paper or painted paper, whatever you're choosing to use. Okay, I'm going to continue that all the way around. I am not going to finish the last bottom two because I'm going to leave a space for my stem and my leaves. And I'm going to hide my stem under these two petals. So I'm going to leave these off and move them over to the side for now. I'm going to make sure that my paper pieces are glued down. It doesn't bother me that parts of it is coming up. I don't have to have a super flat piece for this. In fact, a flower petal, they're rounded anyway, so I kind of like that parts of these petals are kind of coming up in certain spots. So we're going to let this dry for a few moments, and we're going to let our stem and our leaves dry. Make sure that when you're not using your glue that you close it and that you are making sure that it's not getting clogged. Wipe off that tip to make sure that you're able to use it easily later whenever you need it for your collage. While we have our stem and our leaves still drying, maybe you let those dry and you come back tomorrow to work on this piece. I'm going to do the printmaking for the flower part. At the library, you were given some bubble wrap, and I have already cut little pieces for you. Bubble wrap is such a fun way to print and to add interesting texture and pattern to your piece. I'm going to reuse some of the colors that I painted my flower with. You can do the same thing, or you can completely go with some different colors if you want. But I'm going to take my brush and dipping into the color I want, I'm just going to paint on top of the bubble wrap. You don't have to paint the entire part, just a section or a small part. And you're only worried about the bubbles. You're not worried about the background bottom part. If it gets on that, that's okay. It's not a big deal. So I'm going to take my painted bubble wrap, and now I'm going to make a print or a copy. Printmaking is making a copy of something. So I'm going to make a print of this onto the middle of my flower. I'm going to press it down. I'm not popping the bubbles. I'm just being really gentle. And then I'm gonna pull it up. Wow, I absolutely love that. How fun. So I just got a small section and I'm going to get my brush again and paint the exact same area. I'm using the same color. Maybe you want to explore with a new color. And I'm going to come to this part of my flower and do the same thing. Just going to gently, if you're popping your bubble wrap, you're defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do. So maybe you're being too hard with your fingers, okay? You're gonna pull your print now. Cool, so some of my dots or bubbles are overlapping and getting on top of others. That's exactly kind of what I was looking for. I'm just gonna place these here, even though I'm not gluing them down just yet. I'm gonna go ahead and place them there so I can print again and get the overlap of the bubbles that I was getting on the other parts. Gently print and pull your print. Print and pull. I love that added texture and color. I think I'm going to come with just a little bit of red on my bubble wrap and see what happens. We'll see if that does anything. And pull up. How fun, creating some extra texture and pattern, printing on top of what we've already done. You can wash your bubble wrap and reuse it, or you can just let it dry like this and reuse it like that. I'm going to set it over to the side. I'm going to let this middle part dry. And while I'm letting that dry, I'm going to take just a little bit of time to add a pop of this yellow color to my flower petals. I'm not drawing first with the pencil. I'm just going to use my scissors to draw long lines. I'm going to start with 3 and see what happens. Yeah. Part of the fun of collage is being able to layer color and design, and sometimes creating that color and design with the papers that you're layering. I'm going to open my glue bottle again and just put maybe 3 dots of glue onto this piece. I'm going to add that to each petal. I did not measure my yellow rectangles. I cut the long paper lines, and I kind of saw on one petal maybe how long each one I thought should be, and then I just started cutting them. So if that bothers you and you want it to be more exact, you could measure. I like how the yellow that I'm adding to my flower petals kind of echoes the yellow of the middle of my flower. Cut this one a little bit. I kind of feel like it's a little long. And then for the flower petals that I haven't glued down yet, that are just over to the side, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna add my yellow. Putting it up to it. Just kind of guessing about where I would like it to be and cutting. Your glue is going to dry clear, but if the extra glue kind of bothers you, then you can wipe it off a little bit. I'm gonna let our flower petals dry, and I'm gonna let the middle of our flower dry, and now I can come to my stem that I added just a little bit of texture with a lime green paint, and I played around with printing with a fork. So now I can see that my stem that I created is too long. If I used it the length I created it, it would go like that. So I'm going to add just a few dots of glue to the back. I'm going to flip it over and place it down. And look at that extra. What am I going to do with that extra? Well, now that I've glued down my stem and I can see where I need to cut, I'm just gonna come and cut that off. And now that I have my stem down, I can come back with my other flower petals that I did not glue down. Overlapping is one way that you can create visual interest. Remember, just a few dots of glue, that's all you need. It might take a few moments for you to use your fingers to make sure that your pieces are sticking down. Okay, so we have our middle section, our flower petals finished. We've glued. our stem down, and now we're going to take our leaf. You can decide right now if you just want one. Maybe you want to have one on each side, like so. My flower and my petals are way too big for me to use 3 unless I were to cut down my leaves. Let's see what it looks like with just one. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to use one leaf. It is still slightly wet, but if you have waited over a day or two to let your pieces dry, then yours should be ready to go. I'm just going to turn mine on top of a paper towel and get some of the excess paint off. And cut it just a little bit so I can make sure it fits on my paper. With my leaf, I'm going to turn it over on the back, just add a few dots of glue, just like we've been doing. And then using my fingers, I'm going to make sure it's glued down. What a bright, fun collage where we've used multiple techniques to create this piece and multiple types of papers. We have tissue paper and regular construction paper, and we have painted paper, and we've had fun trying some printmaking with different recycled materials. I hope you've had a good time creating your flower collage in the style of Eric Carle this week.